What is up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we are ranking the discography of Dying Fetus. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Alright, classic death metal band Dying Fetus. We're going to start all the way at the beginning, as usual, in 1996 with Purification Through Violence. And this is a doozy of an album cover. Pretty typical death metal record. This is their only Pulverizer Records release. Got some solid songs on here. Blunt Force Trauma. Skullfucked has a nice groove to it. I love that whole Die Motherfuckers ending too. It's got a cool little squealy riff on Nothing Left to Pay For. I actually quite like this one, and going back, I have not listened to it as much as some of the later stuff, but I was pleasantly surprised, and initially I was putting these a little bit lower, but as I kind of worked my way through the discography, they rose up a little bit, so I'm going to put that at B tier. Then similarly, we had Killing on Adrenaline in 1998. This is their only Morbid Records release. This is where they start to get a bit more technical. I like the intro to Intentional Manslaughter, Procreate the Malformed, Fetus Fornication Terrorist. What a title. Has this fun, like, kind of bouncy vocal cadence to it too, and then there's this tremolo transition in the middle. Another one that's pretty solid. I'd put it about at the same level as their debut, and I'm going to put that one at B tier as well. But here's where we get into like the Big Daddy moment here with Destroy the Opposition in 2000. This was the first Dying Fetus record that I heard. It's their first via Relapse Records, which from here on out, that's the label that they're on. It's actually one of the first death metal albums I owned a physical copy of. I got it at, I remember, Reckless Records in Chicago, one of my favorite little like chain kind of used record stores to go to. Picked it up for a couple of bucks. I'd been sort of exploring the death metal classics and figured it was time to give this one a listen since it had such high praise. As I was going through this, I'm like, dang, it's crazy to think that this came out in 2000, because that's the same year as albums like The Sickness, White Pony, Clayman, just like a completely different sound. This feels much more like ancient and feels like it belongs in like the late 80s or at least the 90s in terms of just how raw and ugly it is in comparison to sort of the other big metal stuff at the time. But in any case, popular for a reason. It's legendary. It made Decibel's top 100 of the 2000s too. That opening riff on Praise the Lord is, of course, just an instant classic. Probably one of the most recognizable opening riffs in death metal history. Definitely continuing to step up their technical performances here. The drumming on the title track in particular is just redonkulous. More dynamic songwriting too, like on Born in Sodom, you've got the grindy D-beat part, and then that transitions into the crazy sweeps too, just sort of all over the place. And more independent personality between the tracks as well. Like, I love the chuggy groove of Epidemic of Hate, but then you've got faster tracks, you've got more mid-bass tracks, it runs the gamut. I will say the songs could have been shorter, could have been tightened up a little bit, but it's a small critique for an album that ultimately has to be at S tier for Dying Fetus. And probably for the genre in general. All right, and then in 2003, we got Stop at Nothing. Now, after the last album, despite it being this, like, monument of an album, everyone quit except for John Gallagher.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, you're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
And so, completely new lineup except for him on this album. You can definitely hear it too. It's a very different sounding record, but I really enjoy it because it is fast and it is just aggressive. Like, it is one of their probably heaviest albums, I would argue, which leaves it with the perfect title, I think. You've got another great opener here with Schematics, which is just pure destruction. And then other great tracks like One Shot, One Kill, just vicious stuff. Institutions of Deceit is just an absolute barn burner. And it's a pretty damn consistent record too. Like, I'd say about as consistent as the previous one. The one downside is that I will say, because it's sort of at 11 the whole time, it starts to sort of wear me down in the second half. It sort of just becomes like berating noise at that point. But I will say that Onslaught of Malice is another great track in that half. Those drums, man, both fun, D-beat, and then the machine gun blasts as well. I'm going to go ahead and put this one at A tier. All right, and then it's War of Attrition in 2007, and some considered this to be a return to form after that one. More lineup changes here. Gallagher had called it their most brutal album yet, but I tend to disagree, really. It's kind of less of a punch in the face to kick things off on this one. It's solid, it's well played, but it feels very generic to me. Like, just very processed. There's that personality is kind of gone. It just feels kind of like cold and detached. Again, really well played, but just nothing that really stands out to me on this one. So personally, I would say this is probably my least favorite album. I could put it at like a low C tier, but I'm actually going to go ahead and put it at D tier to just really demarcate the fact that it's my lowest one, and I'd be interested in the comments to hear people who disagree with me.
Reginald, I disagree.
Don't get mad. This is all subjective, right? So if you really love this album, you want to champion it, make your argument. 2009, we have Descend into Depravity, and I have similar issues with this one. They are a trio at this point, too. This has a very Max Payne-ass looking cover, is the way I always put it as well. Very just generic feel again, but I will say it feels better than the last one. It has more standout moments on it. It's got some solid tracks. Shepherd's Commandment is an absolute riff fest. The title track is pretty solid. Ethos of Coercion has a really nice groove and also a nice change in pace and atmosphere towards the end. So yeah, definitely not an album that I go back and re-listen to a lot when I'm thinking Dying Fetus, but I'm going to go ahead and put that one at C tier. And then we have Reign Supreme in 2012. This has the much cleaner, more modern production that are associated with both of the last two albums, I would say, and it sounds really great, I think. I know there are some people who, the minute you do that, they all get pissed off and you sold out and you're joining the loudness wars and all that, but I think it serves the sound of this album really well. Lots of great tracks on here. Invert the Idols is a great opener. More classic grooves too on Subjected to a Beating and From Womb to Waste. More great titles too. Revisionist Past is just an absolute banger. And then Second Skin was actually on the South Park episode Banned in China. Pretty damn consistent album and pretty impressive for a band that is, you know, kind of getting on there in years at this point, but very re-listenable, and I can see why a lot of people vote this one up pretty high. I'm going to put it at A tier, not quite S tier. And then our most recent album at the time of this recording is Wrong One to Fuck With in 2017. Another simple but perfect title to encapsulate this thing. It definitely lives up to it in just how battering this thing is. Rivaled only, I would say, by Stop at Nothing. But in any case, this is that rare comeback album that is actually one of the band's best. There was like a 5-year gap between Reign Supreme and this, and they absolutely brought it. I think it's their longest album too. It's like 50 minutes long, whereas most of the other ones are like just, you know, north of 30 minutes or so. And I'm wondering if it was just because they had so much saved over material over that time frame. Just lots of straight rippers on here. You got sweeps galore on Fixated on Devastation, going straight into another killer groove on that one. The bass sounds really fantastic on this album as well overall. Ideological Subjugation, Fallacy, Unmitigated Detestation, those are kind of my favorites on here. The title track, of course. And even though it is on the long side and probably could be tightened up just like some of the other ones could, it's never really dull. Like, thanks to, again, pretty dynamic songwriting, some good pace changes, some good changes in texture, shifting from grind to groove and everything in between. And I love this album. When it came out, I was blasting it quite a bit. I didn't really have like high expectations for it either, because I've never been like the diehard Dying Fetus fan that's bought every album and whatever, but it came out, I gave it a shot, and it rocketed to the top. And so I'm going to go ahead and put this one at S tier as well. And there you have it. Those are my Dying Fetus rankings. Let me know down in the comments what you think, which is your favorite, your least favorite, and why. Let's get a discussion going down there. And more importantly, stick around. I got plenty more videos coming right after this one. I've got more tier lists you can check out. Probably most relevant people watching this will probably want to watch the Cannibal Corpse tier list. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.